Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inside the Champions Paddock. I'm your host, Stinky One, and I'm here with Broken Hypocrite.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we will be talking about the clips of the week. And then we'll go over the Italian Grand Prix. And then lastly, we will talk about driving techniques. So first, let's look at the clip of the week.
Not the talent, but
this was submitted by multiple drivers.
Anders here, coming across.
I believe Mac T.
Oh! Aguilera coming through, takes all of them. He just took everybody to the cleaners.
Oh, man.
So we have Anders taking a position, but with that, Aguilera actually taking 3 positions at the same time going into turn 1.
Yeah, he definitely had, lower wings than most of the drivers. And with that triple almost DRS and slipstream, he just flew by. A little aggressive, but I like it. It was a fun move to watch.
It definitely was. It was clean. It could have been worse, but obviously that's the point of it. Yeah, so that one was submitted by, I believe it was Aguilera. Nikolai also sent it in, and there's another.
William? Did he send it? I don't remember, but
No. It was Sunbeat. Sunbeat.
Yeah.
So they all were like, "This is a good clip."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the most amazing thing too was how he was able to actually stop the car at the end.
Yeah, he braked later than Anders.
Just a little
able
bit,
to hold the grip.
but he didn't go off track. He was able to keep it on track. So yeah, good job.
Yeah, solid one. Yeah, and with that, let's look at the results. So we had the pole position was Miller getting pole position in Italy. A fun note is the sprints. So we're just adjusting to what the F1 does. So the sprints now, the poles are done on the pole position. So the quali time. So with that,
and wait. Another interesting thing about the pole position here, it was the closest pole position we've had so far because William was 6 thousandths behind me.
Yes, 6 thousandths. It was so tiny. Yeah. And this is a track that can do that too. I think there's so much in play. You have slipstreams and timing windows. Obviously, the evolution of this track is really good. So the later you can go, the better usually. But yeah, only 6 thousandths, which is crazy.
Insane.
And with that, so we had, because of the format, we had Miller taking the sprint winning. So he was the sprint winner as well as getting pole. So he was able to stay in that position for it. And then Miller also won the race as well. Just a solid drive from you. I think it was the first time you really got to do just a normal race for the first time.
Yeah, no recovery needed this time.
Yeah. We saw a few other drivers having to do what you were doing in the other races. So I think you were happy with that, not having to do that. And with that, you also were able to still, because you didn't really have anybody you weren't under threat. You were able to get the fastest lap. I think it's a little bit easier when you have that gap, right? You can maybe just do one lap, try it once, and then usually because you're not fighting anybody, it's a little bit easier to get. And with that, because everybody was like, "Oh, solid driving this weekend," you're able to get driver of the day. So you're able to sweep the entire awards. So it's a pretty good showing. Your first win of the season. You're able to not just win the sprint, you also won the race. You got pole, you got driver of the day. I mean, fastest lap. You won everything in Italy since there are 2 Italian tracks.
Clean sweep.
Yeah, I think.
Don't let me do it again, guys, because I'll keep doing it if you let me.
I don't expect that to happen too often. No. And I don't even William struggles to do that because it is something hard to do. But you're able to do it in Italy, being able to avoid a lot of that, a lot of those incidences. And with that, let's look at the results. So we first have the sprint results. We have the sprint results here. You know, you're able to do it. William is still holding right behind you. We had a safety car, which caused the drivers mostly to just race maybe 2 to 3 laps. There was that huge accident with Aguilera and Landon.
Yeah.
So there wasn't too much racing in the sprint. But then in the race, you can see here, did shift a bit with Anders being able to get P2 and Williams still being able to hold podium because of late penalties going out after the race. Because he did finish P4, I believe, in the unofficial. But William was able to...
Yeah, and considering he was off track with the slightly broken wing at one point late in the race, P3 is pretty amazing.
Yeah, being able to get on podium, I think that's a sign. That's a sign of a good champion, right? Being able to get through all the different stuff. You've done it yourself as well. I think these are the races that you appreciate, the ones where you're able to still maybe get a podium even after all the stuff that happened, because these points matter. You know, every little amount of points will like matter at the end. You know, you could talk about, oh, I lost by 2 because of this race and that race late in the thing, but it all starts in the beginning. So, you know, getting as many points as you can in the beginning will make it easier when you get to the end. So I think that was a really good recovery drive from being able to hold that. But because of your dominance in Italy, we could see that Williams' gap to you has shrunk. And you've gained...
I can actually barely read that.
Yeah, it's because of the... It's not bad in the end. So William has 90 points. You have 71. So you gained a lot because you were in I want to say 4 in the championship. Maybe even P5 in the championship. Last year, P4. But that's what sprints do. They give you a lot of points. You're up to 71 now because of it. Ritzy is still holding the strong with the 43, but Anders with that good showing this weekend has been able to push himself up to P4. And you know, I think Anders has always been there. I hope he can win a championship, or not win a race. But I think a lot of these guys up there can win a race. It's more of being able to put it all together. And that pressure is always there, which is always an issue for all of the drivers. But they're all capable of it. And then if we look at the constructors, we could see their Red Bull still holding P1 with the Haas in P2, McLaren in P3, with the Aston Martin's 4. But I would keep an eye on the Alpine team. The Ferrari team's pretty strong. They've been, you know, holding their position. Alfa Romeo showing a little bit. But we have every team on the board now. Williams and Mercedes both scoring in the sprint weekend, which is nice to see. It's nice to see all the teams on the board. I think they'll start scoring a little bit more now. That pressure of not scoring any points is gone. So I think it'll be a lot easier for them now, here on out.
Yeah, and Alpine has a new driver and Williams has a new driver, correct?
So Williams has taken Hulk. So Hulk moves away from Alpine. Alpine replaces him with another driver. And then Williams had taken Hulk in. So Hulk moves over to Williams instead. Alpine signs a new driver, Ghost. And the Alpha Tauri also signs Super Rissimo.
Who did race
in
Italy, but he wasn't signed
wasn't
officially.
Signed, yeah. So he did sign with them. He has already done a race. Looked pretty solid. German driver. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do. So there's been a few new drivers signing. So I think, you know, as we always say, the constructors can move so quickly. There's not that big of a gap. Maybe there's a little bit of a bigger gap from 2 to 3, but the rest are still very close together. And even the guys up top, we saw you were able to score maximum points in the sprint, which helped you guys push you up really far. So any other team can do that. You can have one driver just have a crazy sprint weekend and sets you up really well. So I think it's still there, plenty of chances. And now let's move on to the driving techniques.
Okay, time to kick things up a notch.
Is there a lot more water in here than usual?
Maybe, but the same rule still applies.
Yeah.
I feel you so close to me. I hope you still think of me. Even I know you found another love. You took away my just to be with you. To be in love and stay together. You gave away the precious love that we had to somebody else. Oh baby, I wanna tell you, remember me, remember everything we used to be. Can you feel my heart pounding?
Okay, so hopefully a lot of you know what that is from. And if you don't know, I would highly encourage you to go watch Initial D, an anime that is a lot of fun. But the reason we showed that clip is essentially to get you thinking about weight transfer and load transfer. So I don't know if you saw in that clip, but there he had a cup of water and the water's kind of moving around as he's driving and he's trying not to spill it. And the kind of the backstory is he's carrying tofu in the back and his dad's like, yeah, if you don't spill the water, then, you know, whatever you do in the car is fine because you're not going to be hurting the tofu. But at the same time, his dad's trying to train him how to become a better driver, and that's how he's doing it. So he's learning about weight transfer, load transfer, by doing
it smoothly.
So
in particular,
doing it smoothly, exactly. Yeah. So that's something I want you to think about while I'm talking about all these different concepts. Because first, I'm going to go into some of the physics of like what driving is, but how I envision the load transfer on my car while I'm physically driving is kind of like that, where I think of something moving to the side as I'm turning or moving forward as I'm braking, how that load transfers from tire to tire. So hopefully that's a good visual thing for you. But think about that while I'm talking about this, and we'll hit back on it later. But first, I want to talk a little bit about how weight transfer and load transfer are two different things, but connected. So weight transfer is when the center of gravity moves and the physical weight moves over the tires differently, either forward or to the side, depending on how the center of gravity moves. So all of that changes because you have liquids in the car, like that cup of water or their fuel, and it shifts when you're going. That shifts your center of gravity, that shifts your weight transfer. Same with your suspension. When it moves, when it compresses, when your tires compress, all that, your center of gravity moves a little bit, and so your weight transfer moves. That is different, however, than load transfer. Load transfer is when you have an acceleration of a mass, you transfer the load from one side to the other. So if you're braking, you have a load transfer from maybe the middle because you're at a constant speed, and then you start braking. You're accelerating backwards while you're braking, and so the load shoots forward. And when you're accelerating forwards, when you're going faster, all of a sudden the load shifts backwards. And if you turn to the right, your load shifts to the left. So when you have a change in acceleration, you have load transfer. So weight transfer and load transfer are different but connected. But keep that in mind as we talk about these concepts. So last week we were talking about the tires and how they're really important and they're what connect you to the road. So all of you kind of know you turn the steering wheel, your car turns, but like what's actually happening? What are the physics of that? What's giving you that cornering force in order for you to turn? So we're going to talk about that first before we start talking about these different driving techniques, because you need to understand the physics in order to really understand why the techniques that we're going to talk about work. So now, Justin, if you can play the video about slip angle. All right. Okay, so that video we just showed basically, kind of showed you how we got to this image. And that's when you're turning your tire, when you're turning your steering wheel, your tire's turning with it. As your tire is turning, because your tire is pressed into the road, your contact patch is actually being, pushed into the road, and the rest of the tire is twisting and not quite lined up with the contact patch anymore. So then as your tire rolls, what's happening is that bit of tire that's coming right after the contact patch is at a slightly different angle than your contact patch. And so when it lays down, it's kind of now at a different angle. And then you lay down the other bit of tire after it, it's at a different angle. And that's kind of how your car is turning, because this contact patch is continually moving and it's at a different angle. It's at this slip angle that it shows here, because you have the direction the tire is pointed in, then you actually have the direction the car is heading in, and those are different. And so the difference between those two angles is your slip angle. And so you'll see here, let me mark it with my pen. You have this lateral force here. What this lateral force is your cornering force. And now the actual physics of what gives you cornering force is not this simple. This is good enough for the game because this is how the game simulates it. It uses slip angle inside the game. It kind of tells you if you maximize your slip angle appropriately while you're steering your car into the corner, you're going to be getting the maximum amount of cornering force as you can out of the car. So I just want you to know what the slip angle is and that it's connected to how much cornering force you can get out of your car. That's basically all I want to show with this diagram
and
here.
It's the difference between
so
car
hopefully
heading and tire direction.
Yep. Tire direction is pointed one direction. You've steered your tire, so it's pointing that direction, but then your car is literally heading in a slightly different direction. It's moving towards that direction because it's your contact patch is continually stepping towards that direction, but it is a different angle, and that is what your slip angle is. We're trying to maximize your grip by reaching the optimal slip angle. That's what we're trying to get to. The specifics of it and the actual physics of it and the real physics going on that make your car turn aren't too important. I'd love to talk about it and give you guys a physics lesson, but it's complex. So we'll just stick with this idea of the slip angle for now. Okay, so then we're going to move on to this graph. And what this graph shows you is right down here, you'll see we have your slip angle in degrees. So like I said, there is an ideal slip angle for your tire, and it's also going to depend on your load, which we have up here. So you can see that the slip angle here is just under 6% when you're at 4,000 newtons. And this is for a imaginary tire. It's not going to be your tire in F1, but for this particular tire, when you have a load of 4,000 newtons, around 5.5% to 6% is where you reach your peak amount of cornering grip right here. So this lateral force again, that's your cornering force. But then if load increases, pick up here to 6,000 newtons, you now have more, you have more cornering grip or more cornering forces that you can get out of your car, and with a higher slip angle. And again, the load increases, you got a slightly higher slip angle down here, 6% or 6.5%, and it's all the way up here now to, over 8,000 newtons of cornering force. So the idea here is there is an ideal slip angle that you're trying to reach, because if you're only turning your wheel enough where you're down here at 2%, look at how much cornering force you're getting. You're only getting about half of what you could be getting, instead of over almost 5,000 newtons of cornering force. You're only getting 2,700 when you're at 2% of an angle. But if you get that all the way up to almost 6%, then you double your amount of cornering force. So reaching that slip angle is going to give you more cornering force. We're going to talk about the driving techniques that get you there in a second. But let this graph sink in a little bit, because the more load you have on the tires, the more cornering force you can get out of the car, and the more slip angle you can put into the tires as well with the more load you have. So that's what you want to pull from this graph here.
You do want to be careful when you go too heavy on a slip angle, though, because as you can see, you start losing cornering force as you go further past.
Yeah, this continues to drop off the further you go past it. And actually, it's going to kind of drop off like this and then really drop off. Yeah, because imagine you're literally losing all traction completely. It's like locking up your tires. You're just going to go in a straight line. You're no longer going to be cornering anymore. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Let's move on to this image. And this is going to be our last image we share. We'll talk about this one for a while. So this is showing a lot. This is showing a whole lot. So let's just start with the track. So you have your track boundary here, right? And then a lot of you know this, just maybe even from intuition. You may not have had to been taught this or anything, but one of the fastest ways through a corner is you start out here, very wide, you start turning in, you reach an apex, and you go back out wide track here. And the reason this is fast is because the the radius of your turn is so large that you can carry, I just hit my mic, sorry. The radius is so large that you can carry a bunch of speed. Now, if you were over here and then you tried to follow this really tight and you go over here, this radius now is not very large. You can't carry as much speed. So that's pretty intuitive. All of you understand that, I think, for the most part. And maybe you were never taught it, but you just kind of know by instinct because you're all racers. But what is actually the fastest way to get around a corner? Now, this video is about driving techniques. And what we talked about in the beginning was a little bit of weight transfer and load transfer. And then here in particular, we also want to talk about trail braking, which is part of that weight transfer and load transfer. So let's take this car actually. How do I do this? Close this, there we go, and I can grab this car. Okay, so I have this car now. So many of you know when you're on the track, you want to use as much road as possible. And in the F1 game, you can kind of come right up to here where your tires are right at the edge of the track. As long as you're not like in grass or something. As long as you're still on track with 2 tires or more, this is where you want to start, because you're going to be able to open up that corner as much as possible and get as large of a radius of the turn as you can get. Now, this image here shows what you should be doing to maximize your speed through the corner. And that is, you want to be braking in a straight line as much as you can, purely just, all braking. You're not turning the steering wheel or anything. You're slowing the car down. Then, right when you begin to turn in the car, so the car is going to start turning, boom. Now you're actually letting off the brakes. But what we're doing is we're trail braking, and we're letting off the brakes slowly. And the reason we're doing this is because if you got off the brakes immediately, remember how I said weight transfer and load transfer, it's going to, a change in acceleration is going to change where the load goes. So if you're braking really, really hard, all your load went to your front tires. And then if you come off the brakes, boom, all your load is going to go to the back tires. And is that going to be good for you when you start turning in? The answer is no, because you want some load on those front tires to help you turn into the corner. So if you let off the brakes immediately without trail braking, getting off slowly, what you're going to do is you're going to send all that load to the back tires, and you're not going to have load on the front tires to help you turn into the corner. So you're going to start trail braking, meaning you slowly get off the brakes. You're going to pull off the brakes, and as you're pulling off the brakes, you're slowly going to turn into the corner. So you'll start increasing the angle on your steering wheel the more you go into the corner and the more you come off the brakes. Once you've reached the right speed, once you've slowed down enough where you can make it to your apex off the throttle and off the brakes, you want to be off the brakes, and you want to be basically, you're right here now in this blue section where it's pure cornering. You're not accelerating, you're not braking. You're just kind of flowing through the corner, and you're at that slip angle with your tires where you're maximizing the amount of grip through your tires. And so you're traveling through this corner, boom, you're getting really close to your apex, and now you can start accelerating. But you don't slam on the accelerator, because if you do that, the weight's going to transfer again all the way to the back. Quickly, you're going to lose the front load, and it's going to be hard for your tires to keep turning. You're still in a corner, you still need to be turning. So what you want to do is you want to get on the throttle, but nice and slowly. As you're unwinding the steering wheel, you're slowly getting on the throttle. And it is going to move some weight to the back, and that's good, because you want that load to transfer to the back slowly as you're unwinding the steering wheel, so that then you can use that grip, that load, to help you accelerate. And then once you reach the outside of the corner, you're out here, you can get full throttle now. Boom, boom, boom. All the loads transfer to your back tires. You take your car out as wide as you possibly can, and you go down the straightaway. Oops, go back over here a little bit. Okay, so that's the idea. But again, let me say this really clearly. When you start braking, full brakes, on the brakes as hard as you can. Right when you start to turn in, you start getting off the brakes. The more you get off the brakes, the more you can turn the wheel. You're going to be turned at a certain maximum when you're completely off the brakes. You might coast for a while. Ideally, though, you're not going to be coasting very long at all. It's very, very minimal amount of time. You reach that apex, or right before the apex, you start getting on the throttle, and as you start getting on the throttle, you slowly unwind the steering wheel. You never want to be in the place where you turn in and then you have to turn back, you have to correct. Like, it's going to happen a lot, but like, ideally, you turn in really smoothly, you reach a certain maximum lock, and then you're slowly unwinding the car again. And it's one fluid motion. You're on the brakes nice and smoothly, or quickly, then you're off of it nice and smoothly, then you're on the accelerator nice and smoothly until you're full throttle again. And so that's what you want to do. You want to keep this as smooth as possible. Why though? Why do you want to keep it as smooth as possible? We already talked a little bit about why you want to load the front tires as you're coming into the corner and you're braking, and you don't want to lose all that load off of the front when you start turning in, and how you want to start loading the rear tires, but you don't want to load them too quickly when you accelerate. But why? So let's talk about that real quick. So first, let's look at the center car here. And what I'm going to do is I am going to take a pen. Shoot, I've copied these things multiple times. Here we go. Here's my pen. Okay. So actually, let me do white. So let's do this. 25, 25, 25, 25. Okay. So what this is let's imagine that you're right here in this blue area, or maybe over here in this green area, we're in a straight line. Either one of these is fine. You've got this load on your car. Your tires all have, grip on them. The load is evenly distributed. And because the load is evenly distributed, each of these tires is sharing 100% of your maximum grip that your car can have. So this is 25, 25, 25, 25, 100% right now. So you have 100% grip. But what happens when you start braking? Here, so let's do this one down here. You start braking, let's say this goes to 30%, 30%, because you've transferred load to the front. So what happened to these rear tires? You might think that it's 20% back here, 20% back here, but in actuality, it's kind of more like 15% and 15%. And so you actually only have about 90% of the total grip potential of your car. And the reason for this is something called, tire load sensitivity. So load sensitivity. And I think the best way I can describe it is, you know how we're saying your car tire is being pressed in the ground and you have this contact patch? Well, what's happening when you transfer load to the front is the fronts are getting pushed more into the ground. The contact patch is getting bigger. That's good. That's why this number goes from 25 to 30. You're getting more grip because your contact patch is bigger. You got more grip in the tires. But what's happening at the rear is the contact patch, it's actually decreasing. It's lifting up a little bit. And the difference between lifting the rear, pushing into the front, that change, you're actually losing a little bit of your maximum grip that you have available to you, because you can't always have 100% all the time. You're only really ever getting 100% when you have perfect balance and everything, all the load is evenly distributed. If it's not evenly distributed, even though one tire is going to get a little bit more grip, the other tires aren't. So what exactly does that mean for this cornering here? Well, ideally, if you could somehow have perfect load where you have 25% grip on all these tires at all times, or let's say even maybe you do somehow have 30% on the fronts, but 20% on the rear, but you still have 100% grip, that obviously is better than if you lost a little bit of overall grip. But that's just impossible. You can't do that. Anytime load is transferring in your car, you are losing some potential grip out of your car. That's just the way it is. So understanding load transfer will help you minimize the effects of that loss of potential grip.
And that's where that smooth analogy comes in.
That's where the smoothness comes from. Also, it's important to note that F1 cars are built the way they're built in order to literally decrease the effects that load transfer has. The amount of load transfer that an F1 car has is significantly different than your mom's, Aerostar, a van, because the cars are really low to the ground, they're really wide, they're really long, and because they're low, wide, and long, when you have a change in acceleration, the load transfer from the front tires to the rear tires or vice versa is much less significant than if you had a really tall car, a really heavy car, a really squat, short, like a, not wide car. So F1 cars are built with center of gravity as low as possible and really wide and really long in order to decrease the effects of load transfer, because that allows them to get, more potential grip out of the car in all conditions at every angle and all that. So that's why they're built the way they're built. And that's why understanding load transfer is important. And even though they do as much as they can with F1 cars to decrease the effects that load transfer has, it's still a thing. It's still very, if you don't understand it, you put yourself in a bad spot. You're not going to be able to get the maximum out of your car. So I'm trying to say. Okay, so then this top one here, let's say this is when you're accelerating out of here. And it's basically going to be the reverse of this, where your load transfer moves to your back. You got 30% load back here, but now you only have 15% load up here. Okay. And then what you can also do too is literally actually too in the middle of the corner, you're going to be more like 15% here, 15% here, 30% here, 30% here as you're cornering, because your load is transferred to the outside as you're turning. As you're turning left, your load is being transferred to the right of your car. So this isn't so bad though. Like if you're here in this blue area and you got this load transferring over here to the tires on the outside, that's not such a bad thing. But again, you can see you still only have 90, like this is only 90%, the 30, 30, 15, 15, instead of 100% where it's all evenly loaded. But let's say you're in the middle of the corner. So let me grab the car here again. So let's say you're in the middle of the corner here, but you had to make a correction and you moved the car this way a little bit. Now all of a sudden, the load here is switched. These 30s is over on this side, and the 15s over here. And so then when you try to switch back and turn again the other way, you don't really have as much grip as you need to get that car turned again. So same with like if you came off of the throttle, you came off the brakes too quickly here and you transfer all that weight again to the back. You are now going to have this thing up here where you have these 30s, 30% on the rears and only 15% on the front, and then you don't have any grip on your front tires to turn the car into the corner. So this is why understanding load transfer is really important, and understanding why trail braking is so powerful. So again, as you are, grab this car, as you're entering this corner here, you want to come off of these brakes nice and slowly so that your front tires aren't unloaded too quickly. If you unload them too quickly, you will not have the grip you need to turn into the corner. And so if we take a look here now, I'll grab my pen again. Over here at this GG circle. Oh, I don't want white. I want red. So this is what this is showing is your braking. So this is the G forces or the grip, I guess, as you're braking. It's moving down this way as you're braking. And then when you start coming off the brakes and you start turning the car, now your force is going to the left and it's decreasing because you're coming off the brakes now. So the load is transferring to the front and your grip is going to the front of the car. And then you get here where it's all pure cornering now. Right through here, you're cornering. And then you start accelerating and the G forces start going forward. So like this is what they call a GG circle. And this is the shape that you want all the time, because it means you're maximizing the whole corner. You're maximizing your grip through the whole corner. The G-forces pushing you against the other side of the car is going to be, 5 Gs in an F1 car, 6 Gs even, if you're really maximizing it and you're in a high-speed corner. So, what a lot of bad drivers will do, let's show this real quick. What a lot of bad drivers will do is they'll brake really hard, but not hard enough. And so they'll go down here. Then they start turning the car, but what they did is they got off the brakes too quickly. And so when they start turning the car, it kind of goes like this. And then they come on the throttle a little bit. They're actually turning the steering wheel enough finally, and they're getting a little bit of cornering traction. And then they get back on the throttle, but they're not aggressive enough, and they kind of do this. They have this shape like this. You'll see this shape a lot on GG circles, which we can generate with Podium. You guys will see that later. They have the shape where like they're not maximizing their braking zone. They're not trail braking, so this maximum amount of G-force isn't being reached over here. And even at their max cornering, they went in maybe too shallow or something. They're not maximizing the angle of attack. And they just can't accelerate fast enough. So like it'll look really bad. But what you want is a nice boom, boom, boom. And really it's not going to be as tall as this, because you brake a lot harder than you can accelerate. You brake a lot faster than you can accelerate. So it's actually the real shape. Let's say we're turning right now. You come down here, and then it kind of comes out like this, and then you start accelerating, and it kind of looks like this. So like this is the area that you kind of want to be in, right in here. Anyways, all this to say that load transfer really, really matters. Trail braking is part of load transfer. It really, really matters. Getting on the throttle smoothly really matters. Driving your car smoothly through the corner, not constantly correcting your wheel, not going in too quickly and then having to unload a little bit too quickly. All of that is going to be moving that load around and making this graph look like this bad example. And you don't want the bad example, you want the good example. When we look later at actual data from Podium in some of our future videos, you'll get a better idea, I think, of how this looks. But for now, I hope this kind of makes a little bit of sense. Also, let's take this car again. Let's delete one of these. Take this car again and talk about the racing line. One thing I see a lot of people do is they're out here, traveling not really at the edge of the track, but they're out here at the track. And then they're like, oh, I need to get to the edge of the track. And they come in with an approach like over here. And before they start turning in, they're maybe even braking where they're headed off track. And then when you start to turn in, maybe you're trail braking, that's great. But if you were at that approach angle, maybe you can imagine this, but your change in acceleration as you're going from outside to then changing direction, point in the other direction, that change in acceleration is greater than if you were approaching just in a straight line here. And because that's greater, you're going to get more load transfer to the outside. And you do like load transfer to the outside, that's fine, but only if you have to have load transfer. So if you're inducing more load transfer than you need to have, you're actually losing grip, because remember, you can't have 100% grip when you're when you're getting load transfer. So the more load transfer you get, the less grip you're going to have. This 90% might actually be 80% if you're causing the car to have way more load transfer than you actually need it to have. So you want to decrease the amount of load transfer that you do have through a corner while still being as fast as you can be and still maximizing the amount of grip. So like, if you're going really, really slowly, you can have 100% maximum grip because you're not really loading anything one side to the other. but that's not quick. So you have to be quick, but it's all about compromises. Because there are multiple ways you can take this corner too. So this person here, they could be traveling here, they can be braking in a straight line really, really hard. And then let's say they get all their braking done, they reach the speed that they need where they can make this corner now with this nice big arc. And they start turning their car, they're not on the brakes anymore, they're not accelerating anything, they're traveling through the whole corner. They're just kind of coasting through the whole corner until they get to the exit. Once they get to the exit, they get on the throttle again. Boom. That's not a bad approach because, you know, you are through that whole corner, you are getting a good amount of maximum cornering because you're not on the brakes, you're not on the throttle. So you're not transferring that load around too much. It's only being transferred, you know, to the right. But you're losing a little bit because that means you would have had to brake earlier. If you're not trail braking, that means you would have had to brake earlier. It also means you would have got on the throttle later because you didn't start accelerating earlier. And so there's compromises you're making. So you need to find that balancing point where you're braking late enough, trail braking just enough, getting on the throttle early enough, but not too early, and maximizing your angle, maximizing the radius of the corner that you're taking. Like all of this is all compromises. The reason I want to say that is because there is no one driving technique that is the perfect ideal technique. Now, obviously, if you have a car and it's set up a certain way and you have a corner that you're looking at, there is an ideal and maximum way to take that corner. However, you'd have to do a lot of computer simulations to figure out exactly what that perfect maximum is. And then if you approach a different circuit or a different corner, or your car setup is a little bit different, that whole maximum way to take that corner is now changed. Your tire temperature changes it. Your tire pressures change it. The air temperature even changes it. The air density changes it. So everything changes it all the time. So there is no perfect way to take a corner. I mean, there is, but you will never be able to achieve it. No one will ever be able to achieve it. Maybe a computer simulation, if it had all the data, could achieve it, but that's about it. So what I'm trying to say is your driving technique that you practice and you learn can be good. If you look at all the F1 greats of all time, they all drive differently. If you think of Michael Schumacher, he used to throw the car in with a lot of speed. He'd get a lot of rotation in the middle of the corner and then get back on the throttle as hard as he can. So like some of these corners that were like, you know, more than 100, 120 degrees, he'd actually do like a double apex because he dives it in so hard. He rotates a lot. He really liked a good front end on the car, and he'd rotate the car around and then he'd get back on the throttle. Max kind of drives the same way. He doesn't look as aggressive because these cars have so much more downforce and everything, but he drives very similar to how Michael did. But then if you look at Jenson Button, completely different driver, yet still a champion and still a very good driver. And that's because he was very smooth with the car. He didn't like to load the car around. He didn't really care if the front end had a lot of grip on it and he could rotate. He was just always very smooth. He used the throttle. He would throttle the throttle and mess with the brakes a little bit. But he was very smooth. Where when he was teamed up with Hamilton, Hamilton wasn't smooth with his steering, but he was very smooth with his throttle application, where he always liked a very steady, even braking and throttle application. And then he would adjust the steering wheel. Where Jenson Button was the opposite, very smooth on the steering, but he would adjust with the throttle and the brake. Another guy who used throttle and brake to drive was Senna. You would see him, you know, enter a corner. He'd kind of get a little bit of a four-wheel drift going. And all of that drifting, that four-wheel drifting to get the rotation right before the apex was all done with the throttle. He would constantly be on and off the throttle. Part of that was probably because the cars were turbocharged. He's trying to like minimize the turbo lag or something. But like all these drivers, they have different driving techniques and they're all quick. They all work, but they're only quick because they understand how load transfer works, how trail braking works, how the basic like physics of their car work, and they take advantage of it. They all take advantage of it in slightly different ways, and they all are going to take corners differently. If you look at how Hamilton takes certain corners on Silverstone versus how Max does, completely different, but yet they're both quick. They both have pole position at Silverstone. Again, it's not just because the cars are slightly different, because the setups are slightly different. They are. That is going to affect how they drive, but also they've perfected their technique that works for them. And so I will encourage you, once you understand, you know, what load transfer is and how to trail brake, how to be smooth with your inputs, to then work on what works for you. Because there is no perfect way to do it that you'll ever reach anyways. So you might as well find what you like. And then what you'll see is, based on what you like, you'll start setting up your car in a way to either give you more oversteer built into the car or more understeer built into the car. So I personally, I kind of like a really balanced car, but if I had to have it one way, I want the car to be more loose. I want more oversteer in my car, because I know I can get more rotation out of the car if there's more oversteer and it turns more. But some people really, really like more understeer in the car because it means they can push it harder. They can throw it in harder. They can get on the gas earlier. So find what works for you. Understand how load transfer works, how trail braking works, because you need to understand those things in order to be fast. Then once you realize, like, you'll kind of get it once you see what you like in the car. If you like it to rotate more or not rotate more, then that's when you'll start learning how to set up your car for that. And that's a different topic altogether.
Yeah.
But I know this was a lot, but hopefully it kind of made sense.
Yeah, just remember, you want to be a...
Justin, do you have anything to input or any questions you have also?
You just want to remember to be a smooth operator when it comes to load transfer.
I can't believe my headphones turned off in the middle of that.
You're talking so much. Is the
Yeah, I was.
So I was just saying, you just want to be a smooth operator when it comes to load transferring. That doesn't matter what your style is, because all of them do it. They're transferring the load at the right time, at the times that they want it to, right? Because when you're transferring the load, that's when you're going to get the least amount of grip out of your car, because you're going to be getting grip changing on the tires, right? So you'll be going from the 25s to the 30 on the outsides, 15 on the insides. But as you sustain that, the grip levels will actually increase. And that's where you get the whole, the trail braking, the slowly transitioning into the cornering, and then the slow transition into the acceleration. Because what happens is when you start getting that load transfer, you're going to get a decrease in overall grip. But as that stabilizes, as it gets to a steady state, you get to that maximum grip you can get. Obviously, it's not going to be 100%. That's just not how physics works usually. Yeah. But you'll have a higher grip between that over that transfer period, right? So that's why even when you're coming into the heavy braking zone, people use different methods in getting that weight transferred smoothly. Some just let go of the throttle and then wait a bit. Some do like a mix where you're kind of transferring it at the same time. So there's like different methods in doing all of everything, right? Like even the trail braking, there's different methods and all that. But overall, you just want to be smooth. And I think that's the key, is being smooth through your transitions, because the smoother you can be, the less loss you'll get.
Right. The less negative load transfer you'll get.
So.
And one other important thing to point out about F1 in particular is these cars are highly dependent on the aerodynamics of the car.
Oh yeah.
The faster you're going, the more aero load you're going to have. That aero load is going through your tires. That is part of your load that is adding grip to your car. So the faster you are traveling, the more grip potential your car has. So that is why you want to enter this corner quickly. And that is why also you're not going to start braking down here and not using trail braking. You want to brake as late as possible because you want as much speed as possible going into the corner with these F1 cars. Because the less speed you have, the less load you have, aerodynamic load you have, which means the less load you have on your tires in general, which means the less grip you have. So some people, they just enter corners too slowly, and that's why they can't get the car to turn. You know, people always be like, how did you pass me like that? And it's like, well, you were going slow. I don't know what to tell you. And it's just, it's because the faster you're going, actually, the more grip you do have in F1, particularly, because you have so much aerodynamic load.
And that's why that trail braking works so well, because you do want that overspeed. It's not like a traditional car, right? You do want that overspeed going into a corner, and you want to slowly transition it into just pure turning grip.
Now, trail braking does work pretty well in traditional cars. It works really well, too, because you do have so much load transfer. Like there's more load transfer in a traditional car because it just moves more and the weight's higher and all that in the car. The center of gravity is higher in the car. So that's why trail braking is powerful there. But I think because of the aerodynamic aspects of F1, I think trail braking is just as powerful, if not even more so.
Because you want to carry the most speed you possibly can into the corner because of the aerodynamic benefits, which is hard to do. I'm a victim of that as well. That's why I'm part of the slow club, because I approach the entrance too slowly sometimes. And I've been trying to fix that.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like, you know, your entry to the corner always matters too. Like you can be pointing this way a little bit, that's fine. But like if you're pointed this way, it's usually not good at all. But you also need to be wide enough. So like, there's so many factors.
Definitely.
That you need to take into consideration to be fast. But personally, in my opinion, load transfer and trail braking, when it comes to driving techniques, you just need to understand those. If you can understand them, you can put them into practice. It'll take time, but like I said, when we first watched that video, that initial D video, I visualize how that load is always transferring in my car. Every time I turn the steering wheel, every time I put a throttle or brake input, I'm thinking about, okay, where's the load going? Do I want it there? Do I want it there or not? So yeah, be smooth, put the load where you want it. You'll be fine.
Smooth operators.
That's right.
If you take one thing from this, just be smooth through your transitions. That'll hands down help you more than anything else. If you don't change anything else, if you just change how smoothly you do transitions, I think you'll easily be improving. You'll find some pace just from that. And then then start learning what works for you, trying to maximize entrance and all that.
And clearly at the limit, when you're pushing everything to the maximum limit, it's even harder to be smooth. That's just how it is, because you're at that physical limit. You might accidentally turn in slightly too early. You have to make a slight correction, and because of that, your load transfer is not ideal anymore. There's no way around that. But the more you practice being smooth, you can slowly start stepping up your pace and making sure you're being smooth as your pace increases, and you'll just get quicker and quicker and quicker. So there it is. I hope that was helpful.
Hopefully that helps everybody. I think that even helped me. I didn't know a few of these things. I knew most of it, but
cool. And then if you guys have any questions at all too, you can write in the comments below. You can also message us on Discord. I might put some of these screenshots in the Discord as well, just so you guys can look at them in more detail without the video. And then also, we have more of these videos we're going to be making throughout the season. So if you have any topics you want us to cover, please let us know. What are we talking about next week?
So thank you everybody for joining us. Next week, we're going to be going over basic practice programs. So essentially practice runs that you can use to build a strategy around and like set up your car and all that kind of stuff. And then we will be going over our next race, like we always do, with the setup and kind of just a little bit of a rundown of that setup. And it will be in Portimao, which will be the Portuguese Grand Prix.
Yeah, a fun track, kind of like a roller coaster.
Yeah,
really love it.
I really like watching it. It's one of the best spectating tracks, I think, on the calendar. But yes, that'll be it. Please leave in the comment something that you would like us to cover or just go over. We will be, progressive. We will be going into more detail of things slowly. So if, one of the topics you already kind of knew, we will go further into it later on as well, like a more advanced version of it. It's just, we want to make sure everybody gets a basic understanding of it first. I was your host, Stinky One. I was here with Broken Hypocrite. This was Inside the Champions Paddock, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye, everybody.
Coming through. Takes all of them. He just took everybody to the cleaners.
Man.